Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. I'm so excited for our guest today. He's a bookman at his core. He's a bookseller. I met him at Angel City Books in Santa Monica, but he has his own operations at flea markets and personal stuff. And we have a lot of personal connection, too. We grew up around the same area. Anyway, we hit it off like wildfire, and now he's here delighting us with his books. Tim Conrad Horner, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. And you're a musician. What else? Renaissance man, surfer. Yeah, you're a bookman through and through.
I love books, man. It's fun.
Yeah.
Keeping on the quest, just it's like you fill your house, your car, your room, storage spaces full of books, and then you got to figure out, what do you do then? You just got to buy more. You just need to keep getting more. And it's more is more.
Yeah, and that's the sense I get from our conversations you and I have had, is like it's an endless quest collecting books. And actually, you and I saw each other at a used book sale whose name I won't divulge. But yeah, we've crossed paths in our quests, in our treasure hunts. I now do the thing where if I find a book I already have, I'll still get it so that I can give it to someone else.
Yeah.
Because I just can't let it pass me by.
Oh, for sure.
I was even at the Beverly Hills Library right before this. I got off the bus. I popped in there, and they have a used book store. And I made a quick little pit stop even before this conversation.
I know. It doesn't end. And the thing, too, is that, the more you read and the more you learn about what you like, the more research there is to do. And then there's all these figures that can kind of be these, guiding lights that kind of help you out on the quest. I remember I learned about Federico Garcia Lorca from Leonard Cohen, because Leonard Cohen's daughter is named Lorca. And I had never heard of Lorca, but then you learn about him through someone you already grew up with, and how, Lorca was this gypsy poet that, died in a firing squad during the Spanish Civil War. And it's I would have never known about that guy, or I would have not found out about him soon enough, and he's been such an important poet in my life now, having this incredible Spanish, poet in my life because of Leonard Cohen. Or Joan Didion, when in her book Slouching Towards Bethlehem, she talks about driving around old Hollywood and thinking about Dashiell Hammett, describing everything, who was this kind of early noir writer, wrote The Maltese Falcon and The Thin Man and some other classic kind of noir detective stories. So it's those people like Joan Didion or Leonard Cohen, they have their people that they're interested in, and so you can read them and get downloaded with 12 other authors that they were really inspired by, and then that leads you onto that quest, and from those 12 people you narrow down the ones you really like, and then it just keeps growing until you can't sleep because you're surrounded by books.
That is a significant thing, how you're getting book recommendations from the books.
Yeah, they're good. And you need that too, because even language itself, can you learn how to talk? It's sort of a question. It's sort of an innate programmed thing. I don't know. This is up for debate. But Noam Chomsky, this whole thing of the universal grammar, and how, it's we need each other to learn. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything comes from something else. So it's we learned how to speak from our surroundings as children, and then as you become, hopefully, if we're lucky enough to learn how to read when we were kids. It was really hard for me, but once I started catching on 8, 9, 10, being able to read, and then finding the things that you like The Hobbit, or reading these or 1984 when you're a teenager, certain books will just blow your mind, and you're oh, I didn't even know reading could be fun. I can't, and then you get stung by those few people that really get you and show you that reading can be awesome, and a really inspiring way to exist, to find more people like that. And so I think that it doesn't happen that often that you get completely destroyed the way a book like 1984 would destroy you, where all you want to do is go home and read, and that world permanently exists in your imagination forever after you have that experience. So it's trying to recreate that is almost strange, or something that might not be possible, but we just do the best we can and keep, conversation going and like keeping that curiosity, I guess.
Yeah, and how each author can lead us to new authors. Like if no other person gave you book recommendations, I don't think you'd ever dead end, because books do give you enough book recommendations. That's such an interesting little fragment you picked up right there. And 1984, I just read this year for the first time.
Oh, lucky. I wish I could read it for the first time.
Yeah. What was your takeaway from it? You said it lived in your head for forever.
I think that paranoia is a really interesting genre in general. Like, you know, like William S. Burroughs, I got Nova Express here and Naked Lunch. I feel like William S. Burroughs also fits into this paranoia kind of genre. And then George Orwell too. It's like the insanity of feeling like you're going to be arrested and imprisoned for following your heart, you know? It's like, that's such a raw thing, like knowing what you're doing is wrong in like against all types of law and, you know, but you have to just pursue it out of like just blind or your excitement and your enthusiasm about being with someone. And so that feeling of the paranoia, and where they really thought that in the story where they really think they're doing such a good job getting away with it, you know, and then it turns out that everything was being completely documented and it was all a part of this bigger plan to allow it to take its course in a way. And also to do with fear, you know, like how having fear is kind of maybe the enemy more than anything, you know, and they kind of come true in the end, you know, it's like your biggest fears, you know.
Yeah, well, I was thinking how everyone keeps saying 1984 our society's going to become, and it's like, well, at least in 1984 they didn't have to pay for their surveillance devices. We carry ours around all day and pay a monthly premium. Yeah,
they really figured that out. The subscribers, you know,
just subscribe to your own 1984. I was struck by like those follow your heart scenes, like the love scenes, the way Orwell wrote about the man and the woman alone in that room that they'd found in seemingly an old man's house.
Behind, like up that stairwell. That's the thing. So go ahead.
No, does that stick with you too?
Yeah, I just think about that weird loft space, is that secret corridor that you one day the police officers are running down, or the, you know, it's like that whole feeling of like you're safe, but then realizing that the whole thing is just like not what you thought. And
not what you thought, but in those moments where they thought they were safe, it was so romantic.
It was
like that feeling of just you and another person kind of safe from the world. Yeah, and safe from torment. And like, yeah, the way it was written, I don't think that book gets enough credit for how romantic those passages are. Maybe because the last 100 pages are pretty much torture scenes.
Yeah. Well, it's the fear, you know, but then it's interesting because right when it gets to the point of being too much, it like blanks out and it goes back to just, he's been basically he's been like rearranged. Actually, there's a quote in this Burroughs book here that actually is similar to 1984. This is actually where my artist name comes from, the Subliminal Kid. So it's the Nova Mob. Sammy the Butcher, Green Tony, Iron Claws, Jackie Blue Note, Limestone John, Izzy the Push, Patty the Sting, the Subliminal Kid. He's just listing off like all these figures. The Nova Mob. In all my experience as a police officer, I have never seen such total fear and degradation on any planet. We intend to arrest these criminals and turn them over to the biological department for their indicated alterations. You know, so it's just like that paranoia of just like, you know, all these underbellies of the surveillance state, and now. Yeah,
you were speaking to paranoia literature.
Yeah, I feel like it's a genre. It's a whole world.
How do you identify that?
I think of people like Hunter S. Thompson too, like, you know, the kind of like a journalist just being out there documenting the insanity of being watched from every direction, you know?
Yeah.
And then
you can feel things are wrong. You're trying to put the clues together, but they're not all fitting, but some are.
Yeah. Well, and also now it's like, I feel like because everything is documented, you know, it's been like shown from Edward Snowden that we all have a file and that's kept, you know, they might not look at it, I hope they look at mine because there's gonna be some good stuff on there. But if they wanted to, they have a file for, what you've said on the phone, what you've texted, what your email exchanges have been, what you've searched, they keep a file. And so the thing that I think about now is how, like, I'm like, what do I really have to hide, And so it's sort of like this, as much as we don't want to feel like we're being watched or that we're, our privacy is being like compromised, it's like, there's nothing we can do about it, It's like we're constantly being monitored. So it's like to just feel like that's okay, and that I can share with the world everything that I do and not have a guilty conscience about it. It's like a different way of living, almost, It's like, check me out. Like, I hope that maybe I could get those like voice memos back from like 2011 that I recorded. There was some good songs in there that I lost, So if I could get that file, like
NSA, if you
NSA.gov.
Yeah.
Just send me that.
That's so funny. Have you heard?
I've not got a response.
Well, the other part to that, though, is it's all good until the rules change. And then they have all this stuff on you. And they're like, actually, musicians, we're not letting you through.
Yeah.
And that does happen all the time. I mean, I'm reading about fascist takeovers in Chile and Argentina and at the behest of the United States capital interests.
Oh, well, yeah.
Even when the U.S. left its folly in Afghanistan, the Taliban took back over, and I remember seeing this video of this musician getting his instrument smashed. And
I know they don't allow music there.
Renounce his, and so I'm not trying to add to paranoia, but yeah, it is like kind of on the mind a little bit, because it's like, yeah, what point does as everything starts to eat itself, privatization takes everything from the public sector. Yeah, when are people next? But yeah, it's books that kind of retain that record for us.
For sure. And I mean, but now they're even something like 1984 is up for debate whether it can be put in schools still. Like, there's a lot of, there's a big force out there really trying to see that books like that aren't put on the shelves, which is so ironic too, because that book is all about this type of like controlling of information and stuff. And
yeah,
so
and it's also like one of those books that plants the seed that you are being watched, and there's no more successful form of surveillance than thinking you're being watched even when you're not.
Yeah.
And it's that like panopticon thing where Drew sent it to me, who was our guest a couple episodes ago, where like the best way to surveil the prison is to have the roving eye in the middle of it. And then even if it's looking at you or not, you feel like it's looking at you.
Yeah.
And so like ever since I saw The Truman Show as a teenager, it was like,
I know.
Are there hidden cameras
I used to pretend like I was in The Truman Show when I was younger too. Like it was just like fun to think about that, like it was all a ploy, that everyone was out to get you, and that there was this weird conspiracy that your parents weren't really your parents and all this type of thing, like, because when you're a kid, you're still figuring out what the world is like, and you don't really understand the ways that adults
and you sense that something is contrived in how we all behave.
Yeah.
Our desires versus like our behaviors are mismatched. And so you're sensing that, and then a movie like that hits you, and suddenly you're like, oh yeah, am I being watched right now?
Yeah.
And you're not, but now you are, because you're watching yourself. And then now you are, because cameras are on every door handle and on every street corner. And
I know, which is great for like cat videos and stuff. They catch some amazing.
What do cats do when when they don't think they're being watched?
I feel like at the end of time, when everything is like over and downtown LA is covered in sand, and they've like done a good job erasing all of the hard drives and everything, and no trace of humans left, there'll just be the cat videos. That's how, like, who were these people that made these cat videos? It'll be like the hieroglyphs,
or who were these gods?
Yeah,
who were these four-legged gods?
Or what did they worship? Like U.S. Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Wow, they loved money. They really they built these
how did
amazing...
these cats build the structure?
It's incredible. It was magic,
But so where did your book journey start? You said starting to read was kind of difficult for you, but then you found these books that you loved, and what are your early memories there? Were your parents big readers?
No, they weren't. I think that it started out with, I think reading books like The Hobbit and being like, wow, this is amazing, but not being able to find more. Like I read that and then didn't really know what else to do, so I think I would read one good book every like 6 months or something, or a year as a kid. I loved it, but then I wouldn't know where to go next. I wouldn't really know what to do next. And so Siddhartha was a big one too. I got completely overwhelmed when I read Siddhartha. I think I read it in like one day as like a teenager, and that book totally changed my life trajectory, really. And it's silly to say, but it's just one of those books that I didn't know that a book could have that effect on me,
Yeah.
And so then when I was maybe 18 or 19, my uncle passed away, and he was a writer. And so I got all of his books, which was like all of this kind of 60s literature, like, a lot of like Thomas Pynchon, and then even just classic stuff like Hemingway and Sylvia Plath, and, just things that I didn't really know about yet. And that was really great because I got his version of what, like, a nice book collection should be, and just started going through them. And it turned out to be all these amazing writers like Allen Ginsberg and, Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Henry Miller and, just like these figures that I didn't know who these people were yet. And so as a young person, that literature was really appealing, or even Jack Kerouac, like the Dharma Bums. I think that some of those figures still stay with me, but as a young person, it's a nice lush world to break into because there's so many people you can get into, or even this guy Bob Kaufman.
And they're like sexier too, right?
Yeah.
And they're young and like kind of charged with that like sexy curiosity toward life.
Yeah, you want to go get on a Greyhound bus and like see this girl and then like write letters after like she breaks your heart or something.
Yeah.
You're just gonna like figure it out.
Yeah.
And like
do that 10 years longer than you should.
Yeah. Or you're in a relationship for like a month and a half, then you're heartbroken for like 10 months, That's what I used to do.
Yeah,
and
that's
like
the ratio.
Yeah,
that's
it's
the young
like,
person ratio.
Balance it out.
Yeah.
And
what were you going to say about Bob Kaufman? I've never heard of him.
So he's a San Francisco poet. Solitude's Crowded with Loneliness.
Damn.
This is a good book. This is a New Directions book, which is also a good publisher. And just like, he's just kind of like a shaman poet. I think he was definitely one of those figures that would have been up in San Francisco, just kind of like, a real poet, like lived that life, and his stuff has like a very strong spiritual sense to it, and I think that the thing about the beatniks that I adore them, but I think that it's sort of like Arthur and Bowd, where it's like they're really appealing for a time, and then some of them I kind of grew through, like Allen Ginsberg doesn't really sting me the same way he used to, or Jack Kerouac. I feel like I can just hear all of the amphetamines coming through him now. When I was younger, I didn't know that, but now I'm like, okay, he's just like really high, writing super fast, which is cool. But then like Lawrence Ferlinghetti, though, he still like hits real hard for me. Like I love his pulse. Yeah, it's like comes from a different space.
It is interesting how we change and our tastes change and develop. Like the Larry McMurtry book I breezed through this week. When I was 18, I would have loved this book. And now, I still enjoyed his writing, but it was a similar thing of like, okay, a young guy fucking up. The things that he's enjoying, I get why he's enjoying them, but from my perspective, it's like one-dimensional. It's just interesting how... like Henry Miller. I loved Henry Miller when I was 18.
Yeah.
If you find him at 18, great. It's like naughty. It's esoteric in its ways that aren't too far out. Sometimes it's too far out, and you skip those passages or whatever. But now I don't think I could get through a Henry Miller book.
Yeah, I like reading him kind of at random, or even like Finnegan's Wake. I have it here somewhere. Here.
If you're just listening to the podcast like a true book man, Tim has a box of them.
Yeah, I got a bunch of books here. But Finnegan's Wake is one of those things that like the individual things that come up just at random, flipping it open, are more interesting than trying to read it as like a whole arc. It's like just open it randomly and see if you can get something out of it, especially reading it out loud. So certain figures are like that. And also I think that there's just a certain magic to opening a book randomly and seeing what comes up, and like, oh, that just synced up with this other thing I was reading about, and then how you can...
It's like tarot cards.
It is like tarot cards that you need a little chance to be in there because, I don't know, like
redirect my interest, focus me on something.
Exactly.
Speak to me, universe. And someone put how many years into trying to speak to you into this book.
Yeah, or even the I Ching, which is right here. This book's from 3000 BC, you know? And so it's like, and the people that made this version of it that we know with the 64 hexagrams, and they said that we take no authorship. This comes from sources much older. So it's one of those
people 3,000 5,000 years ago
5,000
are
years
saying it's not even from them.
And that's why there's no specific rituals around how to use the book. You know, it's like very open because they didn't want to claim any type of authority over this book that's essentially this type of ancient wisdom that would have been a little bit more but you know, it would have been something that was forgotten and maybe found again, you know. And
there's so much that has been. You got to just think there's so much ancient knowledge that's either been intentionally suppressed or has just vanished for all kinds of logistical reasons.
Well, and
someone was just telling me about a book called Humankind that I want to read.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's like basically saying that, like, no, people are actually really good at their core, and we've just been, like, suppressing it. And, like, Lord of the Flies, the kids on the island.
I know. Kids are brutal, though.
But this book evidently goes on to say that, like, no, like, 18 kids were stranded on an island in real life, and they, like, worked together. And it was, like... So anyway, there's just such cynical information right now.
I know.
In the world we're living in about how humans behave, and there's no shortage of evidence to that. But books like this and all the books that burned in the Alexandria library.
I know.
It's
my God.
What's the real truth about people? What good are we capable of that we don't even know?
For sure. Because, I mean, there's such a good case for being pessimistic. You just look at everything like, oh, my God, it's terrible. But, like... we can also just choose to be like, hey, I'm just going to see it like it's going to work out, or I want to be optimistic, you know? And that's a conscious bias, I guess, you know, to be that way and to not maybe live entirely in reality all the time, you know, that like I'm going to take a liberty here and say that it's going to work out all right. You know, I don't know. I'll try the best I can to be optimistic about something that is not look very good sometimes, you know, like just the reality of things.
Reality is so subjective and it's so bought and paid for. And it's so kind of a surreality. What did you get from this? The I Ching? Am I saying I Ching?
It sounds E, but it's spelled with an I.
Okay.
So
what's the significance of you bringing that in here while we're on?
I brought it in because it has to do with this chance mechanism, you know. So the chance mechanism of you kind of throw yarrow sticks, but that you take 50 yarrow sticks, you take one out, and then you cut those in half, and then you start dividing those to just get the lines.
Yarrow stick just a little.
It's like a stick.
Just a little stick.
Then it takes about like 4 hours or something to do and then you get a hexagram, and there's only 64 possibilities, and you look it up. But I use coins, you know, or you can flip 3 coins 6 times, so it's a lot quicker. It takes like a minute or something.
Yeah.
And you know, apparently because what they talk about, the reason why the book works or how it works is that heaven can't impart anything directly, like that type of celestial consciousness, or you know, is not able to communicate directly with humans. So the chance is what allows there to be some way for heaven or that type of like, you know, hyper intelligent organization force, whatever, to have some influence on human affairs. So, and all of the problems that it deals with are universal problems, you know, like the problems that were 5,000 years ago were the same as the problems that we have today. You know, it's like there's, you know, some type of political upheaval.
She loves me, she loves me not.
Yeah, I'm heartbroken. These are, or even like art making, or government, philosophy, farming, you know, all of those problems that people had back then, they're universal problems, so that they're all the same. And that's why the book still works. Apparently, the 64 hexagrams are kind of this like structure of space-time that's essentially the grid of like the Earth that's then connected to the sun, the center of the galaxy. It's this type of grid network. That's why the 64 hexagrams work with our kind of chance mechanism. And apparently that after another couple of thousand years, it actually will have shifted enough so that this won't work anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they say that that's not for a long time, so we're okay.
We're good. We're good in this lifetime.
Yeah, but I think that the books help me out a lot, you know, like especially this one, because it's like you have this Taoist mysticism that has been refined for so many thousands of years, and it like went undisturbed for a very long time, you know, way longer than, well, you could compare it to me Native American wisdom, you know, where they went on undisturbed for thousands of years, also just continuing this kind of like mystery schools, basically, you know, what we would think of as like institutionalized magic. They were doing that in Asia also. And then really it's like, I think that so much of that we're so lucky to have these books, you know, and so lucky to have these figures, because so much of, you know, I'm Irish, or my roots are Irish, so a lot of us were stripped of our ancestry, you know, like we don't really know who our people were, or like who to learn from, and what's like good information, especially now with this like information war. So I feel like so much of the good work you can do is just finding things that actually speak to you, and like, hey, this is great, I love this. And no matter how irrelevant it is to the world, like reading, you know, some complete like junkie novel by William Burroughs, it's like just stream of consciousness. It's like, that helps me out. I like that book. You know, it doesn't matter if anyone else understands it except for me, you know. It's like, if that helps you out, that's cool. And I was in this recording session a few months ago with this younger artist who's in his early 20s, and he was talking about how, you know, if you're into playing cards, or you're into like, you know, collecting magazines, whatever it is that makes you excited, I want to hear about that, and I want to like learn about that, because the world is so full of anxiety and depression and, you know, fear, that if something makes you stoked and excited, I want to hear about that. I don't care how dumb and nerdy that is, you know. And so I think for a young person to say that, I thought that was so wise.
Yeah.
You know, and it really kind of helped change my perspective on certain things too, where it's like, no, we're all allowed a little bit of grace just to get like involved in whatever we're into, you know. And
well, and that's where you find the world.
Yeah.
You focus your attention on any one thing, and it's going to reveal so much about your own humanity and the rest of the world by virtue of your concentration on it and your responses and the causes and effects to, you know, what's happening with that thing that you're focused on. Thinking about how you quest for books. I remember I came into the store and you had found a box of like leftist literature, like crazy obscure stuff, and you weren't sure you were going to sell it because it was important. And hearing what you're saying now, it reminded me of that, because it's like, well, also there's a responsibility when you have books physically, because this is knowledge that's not guaranteed to be passed on. And yeah, I don't know, there is something sacred to even just collecting books, not in a materialist sense, but in like a telling the story of the world sense.
Oh yeah. No, I still have all those books. I bought a website, and I'm going to start scanning and posting on there. It's going to be called resistancelibrary.com.
Cool.
So right now it's under construction, but it's going to happen. But it's like, you know, even something like, I have this old music textbook from like the 50s, and like just stuff like this, you know, just like weird notation, like graphic scores. And it's like, whether or not this stuff would have sounded good, I just like the way it looks, you know.
Yeah,
it's like
really cool.
It's like they're just fun, and like this book is like super obscure. It's just some random like 50s textbook, you know. But it's like
a lot of geometry.
Yeah.
And we're looking at like pretty worn, faded to yellow pages kind of vibes.
Yeah, it's just fun that like someone made a book on like graphic scores. You know, it's like that's something I don't see a lot, you know. So it's like when you find a book like that that's obscure, it's like keeping that idea alive, you know, and also just that like maybe making art isn't such an intimidating thing. It's sort of like, if I just learn about all these different sources and things, like my creative process can then just kind of be like, I'm just going to talk about what I've seen, you know, and it's much easier. That's what I think Borges, especially, so much of what Borges is about for me is how he was this teacher, you know, from Argentina, and when he speaks about classic books, he'll be talking about the Iliad or the Aeneid of Virgil or something, and it's like whatever book he's describing, or some like, you know, Central American like hieroglyph scroll or whatever, he'll just become that thing. because he loves books so much, and because he was almost blind most of his life, then he went blind. His first experiences were with books. That was how he first saw the world, because his eyesight was like this close. So those figures, you know, that we can learn from, it's like just having their perspective on things and like their ability to describe the world, and then you get their download. Like someone might put 70 years of experience into like one book, and then you get downloaded with that. And it's like, it really takes a lot of the pressure off of art making for me. I think that it's just like, you know, it becomes something that's just like, I just can keep reading even. And then I don't need to write, you know, like writing will come when it's time.
I love that.
However it manifests itself, it'll be right there for you when you have an idea, because all these figures and ideas are already coming through. So it's not like something that you need to strive for, or like I need to like become a writer. It's like, no, I'm just a reader, and then writing will just come. Like there's nothing to worry about, or, you know.
If it feels like something coalesces in you and it's time to distill it through your mechanism, your shape, your time, your place, then you will. You're like, wait, okay, I've taken in all of these works, and now I feel like something's missing. Let me add to it, is what kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. What you see is not a part of the picture yet, you know? And
yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine you encounter a lot of humanity just driving around hunting for books.
For sure.
You have a big van. You gather your books in that realm.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious how far it's taken you, you know, or how close it's brought you to yourself, or you know, I remember when you found the books that you're going to scan. It was like you found it in an old journalist's house somewhere in Pasadena or something like that.
No, for sure. I mean, it's like one of those things that like everyone's books are like such a reflection of who they are, you know? And so, like, for instance, this journalist whose books I got, it was, he had passed away, and it was his son selling them. And he was stationed in the Middle East, in Palestine, and then also in Russia, and in South Africa, and then also in China. So he had all this really obscure leftist literature from bookstores in those places. So it's one of these things that, like, that person's idea about what, you know, a bookshelf should be, it was like, so I learned so much so quickly, you know. And then even like if you ever go to the Getty, you can go into the library there, and they have like it's all arranged in like the reserve area. You can just, they're pretty chill about you walking around, but it's all arranged by collection. So it's like this person's books, and then this person's books, you know, which is really nice, because it's like you just get downloaded with one person's idea of what a bookshelf should be, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a good reflection of who we are, you know, what you hang on to and what you don't hang on to, and what, you know, you think is relevant and important, you know, like
yeah, it's kind of our DNA.
Yeah,
like the story we believe of ourselves and of the world is reflected in the books we hang on to, if we're lucky enough to have stable enough lives to keep our books.
I know. Luckily, they're not worth that much a lot of times, so there's no point in selling it. I'm like, they're gonna give me $1 for this down the street, so just, yeah.
I know. I don't think there's anything. I think that's it too. Is as I scour free neighborhood libraries and used book sales and whatever, like, I don't think there's anything with as disproportionate of a value, price versus spiritual, physical benefit, emotional benefit to books.
No, for sure. I know people ask me sometimes, they're like, where do you get all these books? Like, is your personal collection when I'm selling at the flea markets and stuff? And because the books I sell is like, it's a little bit different than the books I hang on to. Like, this is the stuff I kind of hang on to, and then like things I sell, I would have all these if I could find a second copy, but it's a little bit more like, you know, Dostoevsky, you know, Albert Camus,
Henry Miller,
things I can find again easily, you know, that aren't too crazy rare. But people ask me like, where do you get all these books? You just like downsizing your collection or something? Like, no, I get them all from those free libraries actually in the corner. I just take everything. I have a route and I go and hit up every corner free library I can find and get all the books. But I'm just kidding. No, I get them mostly from the Goodwill. And, you know, it's one of these things that like, you know, if the bookstore really enables me to buy infinite books, you know? So it's one of these things that you do have to, like I've been dating this amazing girl and she's kind of scared, I can tell, because she's hyper zen minimalist and I'm like hyper maximalist. Like I like things. I like thingness. I want to, and she's like, I don't know if we're going to like work together because you got so much stuff. I'm like, it's fine. It'll be all right. We'll work it out. It's okay. I'll have a library one day. It'll be totally separate in the house. I promise.
I went to my friend's new house up in Mount Washington that, well, not new, but, you know, he knew we moved into. And the first room he showed me was his little library room. And I was like, that says so much about him. Yeah. The fact that this is what he wanted to show off were his books. Obviously, he knows I like books, too, but...
There were some good ones there?
There were some good ones in there. It was a really nice collection. Yeah, I got excited, and then we moved into the other rooms, and I kept thinking about that first room. But no, I'm with you. I'm not a maximalist, but when it comes to books, I am. They're pouring out of every place they can in my apartment. And luckily, my wife's on board. She's got her own little stack next to the bed, so yeah, we're doing okay there.
And I always hear about those stacks next to the bed. It's always like, I can't buy any more books right now. I just need to finish that stack that's next to my bed. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know about that. I have like many stacks, you know.
I went to a great used bookstore up in Bellingham, Washington a few months ago, and this guy, it seemed like there was a method to the madness, but books stacked on from the floor to the ceiling, everywhere you can. You know, you could barely squeeze past them in some places, top floor, bottom floor. It was great.
Yeah, you kind of start to go a little mad, I think, when they're all over the floor. But if you go into a store that has the books on the floor, that's usually the best ones. Yeah. Like, because you find the stuff that's down in some corner, hasn't been on the shelf for very long.
I've been traveling for comedy a little more and trying to hit up the bookstores everywhere I go. And I'm starting to like piece together what makes a great bookstore. Yeah. And I think one thing that's starting to sink in is generally they got to be in an older building.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I can't think of a good. It's tough. I mean, I probably could. Maybe Skylight out in Los Feliz. I don't know if that building's too young.
We'll call them and ask later.
Yeah. But yeah, something about an old building.
It helps for sure.
I went to this book called Myopic Bookstore.
Oh, I've heard of that.
In Chicago.
I've heard about that.
It was great. It was kind of like a Shakespeare and Company.
Wow.
But it had the upstairs reading room, big table, huge bench, huge wooden bench by a window. You could see Barnes & Noble in the distance, too. And you're like, okay, that's where you don't want to be.
I know.
You are exactly where you should be in this place.
The thing that bums me out the most about Barnes & Noble when I go in there is that how many good books they actually do have in there. I'm like, I don't want this to be the kid. It's like whoever's choosing these is real good. Like, they're awesome books in there, you know? It's like I walk around like...
It's the algorithm.
It's pretty solid. They have it down. Like, I'm not kidding. They have good books in there. You just can't deny it. I look around. I'm like, this is pretty stacked. Like, there's some good stuff in here, you know? It's like...
Oh, I have a real fondness for Barnes & Noble. And as a high schooler, I would ditch school and go hang out at Barnes & Noble.
But, yeah, it's on a different... Yeah. I mean, the fact that anyone can exist these days in a store format is, like, remarkable, you know? Because it's like, you know... with these people taking over the world, you know, as far as like, you know, Amazon controlling Whole Foods now and stuff, and it's like everything's monopolized in this way. It's like, I was even at like, you know, self-checkout stands, you know, I'm always like, they should call it just like an honesty station, you know, because it's like, I have to charge myself now. This is terrible. At least before I didn't have to like ding, ding. I mean, this is something that only people who have been broke will understand. Yeah. But like every time, like that hummus was $8 and the bread's not, like every time it's like that. It doesn't feel good.
They should give you a discount for the employee you're saving them.
Yeah, I have to do this work myself now. I'm charging myself. I'm like, this is just weird.
No, it is a bit of a punishment thing, isn't it?
It's terrible. It's humiliating, and then it's just helping someone like, you know, whoever owns, well, I guess, anyway,
But why do I gravitate toward doing it myself? You know, it's like because I've been so turned cold to like having to transact with another human over a transaction. I don't know, but yeah, I kind of prefer to run my groceries through. Sadly, I'm a happy sheep is what I guess that comes down to.
You would do well in 1984.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what a relief.
I love it here. I don't have to think about anything.
All the decisions
you can make up everything
for
me.
This gruel isn't bad either.
Yeah. I know the programming, hey, you know, it could be good. It's just, it is painful to go through the deprogramming, you know, but I think
painful.
You know.
Yeah, I'm reading The Rediscovery of America by Ned Blackhawk. It's a comprehensive native history of the United States. And he does such a good job. He's not really overly emotional in how he's telling it. He's just laying down, comprehensive alternative history. And it's just so brutal. I'm like, man, like this is just page by page, so brutal. And it's deprogramming though. And yet there feels like something important to deprogramming and going, I feel a relief getting closer to the truth of things, or at least another people's truth that has been buried. But yeah, the deprogramming is not. It's easier to be programmed.
For sure. I mean, because even as children, we get told all these fairy tales about things, you know, and even a book like Island of the Blue Dolphins or something, it kind of has this weird, spooky sense that she was just all alone on an island, you know, like no one really knew why. And then, you know, it's kind of just like the real story of that is a lot different, you know.
Yeah. We had to read that in like middle school. Well, you and I discovered we went to like the same school, and we were like close friends with two brothers. My friend was the older brother, yours was the younger, and we were probably like hanging around in the same house at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
But kind of cool.
That was the first place I smoked a bong.
Yeah, it was the first place I smoked weed out of a Coca-Cola can. Not the last.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You were there for sure, but you were probably like 2 feet taller than me, and you know, a 3 or a 4 year gap when you're 12 is pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big, right?
It's like they may as well be like a senior citizen.
Truly, yeah. So, two different worlds. But it is funny to think, because then you and I met up years later. Well, speaking to the rest of your pile, is there anything else you want to highlight?
Well, I find this thing of like certain things like attract each other without, like, I don't know if it's like an unconscious mechanism, but like I'll like notice that a bunch of like turquoise books are next to each other, and maybe it's just how I unconsciously like arrange things. But then like these ones, like books of people that don't have faces, you know.
Oh, interesting.
You know, I just like sometimes I just like having things like that, you know.
So each cover has some kind of human shape, but there's no face on each.
Yeah,
each
and I have more. This
reason.
is all I could find right now.
That's
I have
cool.
like 12 of them, and then, you know, I got Carl Jung's book here on mandalas. You know, he worked these mandalas his whole life. And
what's a mandala?
It's sort of like a little pictograph. Here's some more traditional ones, you know. But a lot of the traditional Tibetan ones are actually road maps of like these inner worlds and kind of describing unconscious, like the different parts of the human experience, and also just like these meditative states. So if you actually don't know, let's see if we can find a Tibetan one. These are Jung's, his art that he kept secret. But if you don't know what the maps are describing, then they just look nice. They actually don't have any real value, that you follow them.
But even when they look nice, it looks nice for the reason that they're probably implying, right? It lines up with symbols that are already sort of primordially in your brain and mean something corresponding to emotions.
Yeah. I mean, they're activating for sure. But the thing I like about Jung and his art is how he kept his art making practice separate from his psychology practice, you know, and how I think that's so much of like the struggle of a lot of people is like, what do I reveal? Like, how do I share my work? Through what medium do I share it? You know? And so for him, it was better just to focus on psychology and alchemy and like Gnosticism and just share that work with everyone and kind of keep his more vulnerable artistic side, his more mystical side, just a secret, you know. And it wasn't until after he died that they found, this is images from the Red Book. That was like his notebooks basically, but they were all kept private his whole life, you know. So it's one of those things. It's like he maybe, or him and his followers maybe, were afraid of what him coming out as like an artist would do to his image as like a very established kind of, almost, he was like sort of a scientist, really, you know, coming at it from, his early work is in psychiatry, you know. So then and he studied directly under the fella, I forget his name, who invented the word schizophrenia. But a lot of like Jung's work is like interwoven into our perception of consciousness, whether we know it or not. Like he coined the term introspection, extroverted, you know, and then all these ideas of archetypes and the unconscious. All of these ideas come from Jung, even though the things I'm sure people have been thinking about for thousands of years. But as a Westerner, he kind of helped solidify a lot of these things, and also
gave a vocabulary to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so whether he was right or not is like up, you know, we have to keep that conversation going. But he definitely helped create a framework to talk about this stuff. And also the thing I find too is that like there's a lot that you can just source from. It's like you just dive into his books on alchemy or Gnosticism or his books on psychology, and there's this whole world to dive into, and he did all of his labor for you, all the footnotes and everything, and it leads you into all these things. He actually does the commentary on this I Ching translation, and then he does a commentary on like another really good translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And then there's another book called The Secret of the Golden Flower, like a Taoist meditation manuscript that he does a commentary on. So he like really helps frame these traditions in ways where it's like, hey, check this guy out, check these people out, see what they did. He's not going to be the person to always explain everything about them, but he'll point you in all of these ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful, someone like him.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of like a running theme in this conversation, is like finding people who inspire you and trusting that they're gonna send you even further down the road to other people who inspire you. And it's kind of it's funny how he kept his art secret, sort of the Western culture thought of your art will discredit you.
Yeah.
You will not be a serious person anymore in the eyes of people if they find that you're an artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, so telling of like the sort of repression and all the various psychological frameworks that he spoke to in his accepted work.
Yeah, they'd be like, he was just making stuff up.
Just like an artist would.
Yeah,
right?
all this psychological jargon, it was just some made up stuff. You know?
Yeah, I wonder how more compelling or not compelling his work would have been had he bravely put that forward.
I know.
And unified who he was.
For sure. And I think at the root of it, there was sort of just this mystic figure who I think his followers especially were desperately trying to control that so that it didn't appear to be what I think it was more, which is just sort of like a cult, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and all of the followers and kind of disciples of his thinking, you know, they really tried to control the narrative to make it seem like, no, he's this scientist, you know, but he's much more mystical than just that, you know. And I think that comes down to the spirit of alchemy, which is that like science and art are kind of the same thing, you know, and that whole quest, the alchemist writings are so mystical and kind of psychedelic, you know, that it's like, there's this whole world. A lot of it has to do more along the lines of farming than it does with what we think of like traditional like magic, you know.
Like when you say alchemy, it's like trying to spin gold out of things that aren't.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that.
Do you mean that also in a larger sense?
No, I mean it pretty much like, about the gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gold. But the gold is a symbol, you know. So like obviously apparently they actually did make gold also, okay. But that's kind of, you know, the reason why gold is an important thing is that gold can't be made on Earth or destroyed either. Like it comes from supernovas, so it all coalesced in the early solar system and then just kind of went to the center, and then through the asteroid bombardment, it eventually came back up. That's why it's only mostly in the mountain ranges and stuff. So gold is kind of the symbol of perfection or, enlightenment or something that can't change, so it's kind of a symbol of like something that we can learn from because it doesn't need to go through any more transformations. It's kind of done changing, and so like that is the emblem for this path of transformation, because we're all changing, we're all transforming and turning into something else, and everything is kind of now, even with like quantum physics, I can see that the like subatomic world is vibrating and going into and out of existence, and is like zeros and ones turning on and off, and even so like at the root of all of this type of like thinking with like quantum physics and stuff, it gets back to this sort of root of like meditation, which is just like observing the unconscious and putting things into a way, or what Jung would talk about, like having the contents of your unconscious become manifest, so we can perceive them and check out what's going on there, so that they don't suddenly manifest in some type of abnormality, and come out like
nip it in the bud.
Yeah, try to get it,
catch it and tame it before it escapes its pen.
Yeah, because everyone is a part of our family. We're all responsible for each other, and what each other do, is like daunting as that seems, but we're all family really at the root of it. So it's like someone that's acting out in this way, like we're a part of that too, and we have that tendency too, and we could have cultivated that bad type of instinct if we had that disposition or that type of programming, and so I think that we have a certain ability to like say, hey, I'm just gonna kind of like check this before it goes too far along, and then through things like I think like psychoanalysis or like vipassana, like sitting meditation, we can start to have the unconscious become something that we're able to check out and see, hey, what's going on down here, like how strange is it down in this world, what's going on here? And maybe it's like Dante's Inferno, and it's like, oh my god, get me the fuck out of here. Or maybe it's like something in between that, so it's like that work is something that not everyone wants to do, but it's it's
here for you if you want it. It's in the books, and then you, like you were saying earlier, you distill it through yourself. Did you want to talk about, I keep thinking about your book idea. Are you still working on that, and do you want to talk about that?
About the things I found in books?
Yeah.
Yes, I brought it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I have just like a folder, and it's just like, they're getting kind of messed up on the way here, but it's like all the things I've found in books, like old bookmarks, some money, like here's some like Clippers tickets from 1987, and then let me see the best way to display this, and then weird pieces of paper. I feel like paper has a lot to do with my practice too, or like playing cards, some money, just like wallpaper. I don't know, like sometimes I just I find a random bit of like a book that did exist, and I'm like, hey, that looks great, like I don't even know what that was for, but I just like the way that this aged.
It looks great.
And then, or this is like a Beatles songbook, like okay hit songs, like come on,
You found that in a book?
Well, this is a book. This is a book.
Okay.
So this is it's just it's like a little document.
It fits in the found objects section more than it is a book.
Well, I also just like that it says okay hit songs. Like it's hilarious. Like
what does that mean?
Alan Watts. Some playing cards. This Aquarian educational group, Sedona. Please send me a free magic and mystery guide catalog for information about your books and tools of self-transformation through the symbolic arts.
And it says name and address.
Yeah, so just send that in,
It's blank.
And then this is what I was talking about, the paper too. Sometimes I feel like pieces of paper like attract each other somehow. Like these two pieces of paper were kind of just like together.
Yes. I don't know if the camera could pick that up, but were they together?
I found them together. I found them like on the same day, kind of like together.
Yeah,
and then some more
red,
art,
white, blue, and flowy and disorienting, but
I was
Nice.
feel like some masculine, feminine element
Yeah.
there, you know. And then more like stamps, some Jesus stamps, some photographs.
Are the
you know.
Jesus stamps real U.S. postal
That's a good
stamps?
question. It says, "Blood of Jesus, save us."
Okay. Yeah, I
I don't
wonder
know.
if those are forever
I'll
stamps.
try it.
or,
I'll send you something and see if you get it. And then like, you know, some songbooks, Sun Records songbooks with an early version of a Billie Holiday song, That Old Devil Called Love, you know. So
And
it's
you
got-
found that in a book?
I found this in a bunch of like magazines or something.
Yeah.
And then this I just thought was a cool piece of paper. It's like some apocrypha, I guess, or like early Gnostic literature.
Cool.
But just like, you know,
So in your hunt for used books, you found all of these things in the books, and you're gonna like scan them and make a book.
well, I think that, yeah, and then also just to document all the bookmarks too. It's like, because bookmarks are such a nice little document of a whole world that often existed for decades. You know, now they're all gone mostly, most of the bookstores. I found a Melrose District bookstore bookmark, and it was like 12 different bookstores that were all next to each other on Melrose
On
Boulevard. I guess
Melrose,
that was
huh?
like a book district back in the
Well,
day.
we had Larry Charles on not too long ago, and he said back in like the 70s, 80s in Hollywood, there were tons of used bookstores because they were just cheap.
Yeah.
You can like rent out a space, throw up some shelves, and you're good. Like
Yeah.
the operating costs are not too high on that. I got one from that old bookstore that used to be in Brentwood. I got that one, and then I've been wanting to read the Aldous Huxley Doors of Perception book for
yeah.
a long time, and I was up in Portland recently, end of summer this year, and came across that book in a free library with a receipt from Powell's, but like 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just stoked about that.
I know,
the
well, books-
receipt probably more than the book.
Yeah. Well, sometimes too, the books preserve paper really well. Like when there's a little piece of paper stuck in there for 30 years, it's still fine.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess that the whole idea with this is that like just to share all of the bookmarks and the random little things that I found, you know, and along the way, is it's also like a nice way to make a book.
I love it.
And also not have it be too hard. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
it's an easy
curation.
first book to make. I don't have to like write anything. I could just like, hey, I got a book. Check this out. You know,
Well, it
like,
goes back. It's like a physical version of what you were saying earlier, which is like distilling all the different influences and expressing them through yourself.
yeah.
And that's what you're doing, but in the physical with these knickknacks, I'm sure you could find some good little notes that people write inside
Oh, yeah.
books to each other.
Totally. Or all the love letters and
The
things
love
too.
letters, or the random, like, there's sometimes just these inconsequential notes like, hey, I think you'll like this, or keep doing the good work you're doing. I think this book will help, you know. I don't know. It's pretty special stuff. Well, speaking of special stuff, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
fun.
So
Oh, yeah.
fun. I expect this to only be one of a continued many with you.
Yeah. Keep in touch for part 2.
Yeah, for part two.
Couple months
Oh,
down the
definitely.
road.
I'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe when you put this book together and you're ready to show the world its final form, come
I
on
love
back.
that. Oh yeah. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, and we'll be seeing more of each other out and about in the real world of books and other things. So, Tim Conrad Horner, thank you so much. Is there anywhere you want people to check out your stuff?
Yeah, you can just find me on Instagram, the Subliminal Kid from the Burroughs book, Nova Express. Yeah, that's my Instagram. And
Cool.
yeah, keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Then you can also check out Reverie Books. Reverie Bookstand is my bookstand Instagram.
On Instagram, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool one.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. And we're going to take December off, so this might be the last episode until further notice. So thank you all for tuning in. Have great holidays, and we'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.